I still remember the moment my world cracked open. The phone on my desk rang. Only 11 before I picked it up. A calm, professional voice said, "Major Carter, this is Attorney Hayes. I represent General Robert Morgan. He's dying. He wants to see you." I froze. The sound of fluorescent lights and humming computers faded. "Excuse me?" I asked. "You've got the wrong person." He hesitated. He said, "You'd say that." That was the moment something deep inside me shifted, like a locked door rattling after years of silence. The rest of that morning, I stared at my half-finished report at Camp Pendleton. Outside, the Marines were doing PT, their cadence echoing across the base. Everything about the day was ordinary, except for those words that wouldn't stop replaying in my head. He wants to see you. I'd spent my entire adult life believing I was an orphan. The state file said both parents died in a car crash when I was 4. I never questioned it. I grew up in a Norfolk orphanage, bounced between foster homes, and enlisted the day I turned 18. The Corps became my family. Duty replaced blood. But now, a stranger's voice claimed a man I'd never met. A 4-star general, no less, was my father. I told myself it had to be a mistake. There are hundreds of Morgans in the service, and plenty of lawyers making calls to next of kin. But the way he said my name, Elena Morgan Carter, sent a chill down my spine. That night, I couldn't sleep. I poured myself coffee and sat on the couch in my base housing, staring at an old keepsake box I hadn't opened in years. Inside fragments of a life barred a hospital bracelet, a faded photo of a man in uniform holding a baby, and a small silver locket shaped like an eagle. On the back of the photo in blue ink was written, "For IGM, my Morgan." I rubbed the photo between fingers, feeling along the middle. I'd always thought it came from the orphanage donation box, just something I picked up because I liked the uniform. But now it felt like a piece of evidence. By sunrise, I'd made up my mind the lawyer's number was still on my call log. "Mr. Hayes," I said when he answered, "I was hoping you'd call." "Major," he replied, "General Morgan doesn't have much time." "I don't know what you're expecting from me," I said, "but I don't even know this man." His voice softened. "He knows you, Ma. He followed your entire career. He said you'd understand when you saw the house." I asked, "The Morgan has stayed in Arlington. Can you come today?" I looked around my quiet kitchen. No family photos, no plants, no one waiting for me to come home. Just the Marine flag on the wall and a duty roster on the fridge. "Yeah," I said. "Finally, I can come." The flight to D.C. was uneventful, but my thoughts weren't. I kept replaying everything I knew or thought I knew about my life. The military teaches you to compartmentalize, stay focused, stay disciplined, but some things can't be boxed up. I remembered being 12, watching the 4th of July parade. A Marine convoy rolled by, flags snapping in the wind. I'd stood at the curb and saluted, even though I didn't know how. A man in the passenger seat returned the salute with a smile. I always wondered why that moment stuck with me, why it felt like recognition. Now I wondered if that man had been him. I landed at Reagan Airport. A driver was waiting, a quiet man in a gray suit holding a sign, "Red Mad Carter." He didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer answers. The drive took nearly an hour through suburban Virginia, where the streets grew wider and the houses larger. Finally, we turned onto a long gravel road, lined with at the end demand white iron gates and an American flag at half-staff. Mr. Hay met me at the entrance. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Thank you for coming, Major," he said, shaking my hand. "The general's upstairs. He's very—" I'm only here to clear up a mistake," I replied. He nodded, though his eyes said otherwise. "Understood. But before you go up, there's something you should see." He led me through a grand hallway lined with, stopped in front of one my knees nearly gave out. It was me, not a look-alike, not a guess-me, in Marine dress blues standing at a podium with the American flag behind me. The brushstrokes were unmistakable. Someone had painted from a photograph, my photograph. I turned to him, my voice barely. Where did this come from? The general commissioned that last year, Hayes said quietly. He said it was for his daughter. My pulse pounded in my ears. This doesn't prove anything, of course, he said softly, but maybe what's upstairs will. He led me up the staircase. The house was eerily silent, except for the faint hum of medical machines. A nurse nodded as we entered a bedroom heavy with the smell of antiseptic and lavender. On the bed lay a man in his 80s, skin pale, his par, eyes still sharp beneath his silver. His chest rose and fell. He saw me. He tried to sit up. I should have saluted, but I couldn't move. His voice cracked, rough from age and illness. You kept your mother's eyes. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. I wanted to shout, to demand proof, but all that came out was, why me? He smiled faintly. Because you were safer not knowing than he, the one. I took a hesitant step forward. You can't just appear out of nowhere and expect me to... He lifted a trembling hand. I didn't appear out of nowhere. I watched every step, every deployment, every medal. Tears burned behind my eyes, but anger won. You watched while I grew up alone. His hand dropped. It was the only way to keep you alive. I turned away. You should have let me take my chances. The monitors beeped steadily. He closed his eyes, exhausted. Hayes touched my shoulder. Maybe it's better if you rest. He'll need to recover before he can explain. I didn't answer. I just walked out downstairs. The lawyer handed me a sealed envelope. He asked me to give you this. He said only if you came. I didn't take it right away. My hands were shaking. Finally, I slipped it into my pocket. Outside, the late afternoon sun was fading. The flag on the front lawn still in the quiet air. For the first time since I was a child, I felt truly unanchored, like every truth I stood on was dissolving beneath me. In the distance, I heard a bugle playing somewhere faint, and it wasn't taps, but it might as well have been. I looked back at the mansion, the place of a man who might be my father, and whispered to no one, what if everything I built my life on was a lie? The Morgan estate didn't look like a house. It looked like history itself, the kind written in marble in silence. Driver crackled against the gravel drive. As we approached, for a moment, I wondered if I was still in the same world I'd left that morning. The gates opened slowly, the kind that creak because they've been there longer than most lives. Beyond them, a flag hung limp in the late Virginia air. The house was vast, but not warm. It carried that solemn still of a place where everything valuable had already happened long ago. Hay was waiting under the small figure in a black coat when he saw me step out. He gave a faint, knowing smile, Major Carter. He greeted, or should I say, Miss Morgan, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I said, keeping my voice steady, I'm here for answers, not reunions. Fair enough. Follow me. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood. In medicine, portraits of soldiers lined the walls. Generations of Morgans in uniforms from World War I to Afghanistan. Each face carried the same proud jawline, the same distant eyes. I avoided looking at them. Then we turned a corner and I stopped dead. There, above a mahogany sideboard, hung a large oil painting. The light from the tall window fell directly on it. It was me. Rest at my side. The likeness was unmistakable. Someone had painted me from an official portrait I'd taken 2 years ago. The attention to detail was chilling. Even the small scar above my eyebrow, a mark from training, was there. My throat tightened. Who painted this? An artist from Boston, Hayes said quietly. The general commissioned it, said he wanted to see his daughter the way he imagined she'd be. I gazed at the brushstrokes until the lines blurred, So he's been watching me all these years, admiring. I think, the lawyer corrected softly, not spying. I didn't answer. I just kept walking upstairs. The nurse opened the door to the master bedroom. The air was thick with the faint hum of machines, oxygen-concentrated monitor, the rhythm of endings. General Robert Morgan lay on the bed, frail but unmistakably dignified. Even half broken by illness, his presence filled the room. His uniform jacket hung neatly on a chair nearby, 4 stars gleaming faintly on the shoulders. When he turned his head, our eyes met. His gaze was clear, sharp as a blade. "Elena!" He came. I froze at the sound of my name. He said it like someone who had practiced it for years. "I didn't come for you," I said. "I came because I wanted the truth." He smiled faintly. A ghost of command left in his expression. "The truth," he said, "is heavier than a rifle, Major. You sure you want to carry it?" I clenched my fist. "Try me." Motion toward the chair by his bed. I didn't sit. I stood at parade rest. Habit more than respect. "I know you're angry," he said. "I'd be too. You had every right." Angry. He laughed a dry laugh. "You left me in an orphanage and built a museum around your guilt." He coughed, but his eyes never left mine. "You think I didn't try to bring you back? The foreign I lived in wasn't safe for a child. You could have told me later. You could have come for me when the danger passed. The danger never passed. Stood near the doorway, hands folded, listening but not interfering. "Your mother wanted you to have a normal life," he continued. "When the threats came, we had to disappear you. It was the only way to keep you alive." I shook my head. Disappearing a person doesn't protect them, it kills them. Slowly. His eyes softened. "You survived. You became everything we hoped you'd be." I didn't want to hear that praise sounded like pity from him. I stepped closer, just enough to see the veins beneath his skin, the tremor in his hands. "Do you know what it's like?" I said quietly. "To grow up thinking no one wants you, to build yourself from nothing, and then find out you were someone's secret all along." He swallowed hard. "Every medal you earned, every line in your service record, I kept copies. I was proud. Pride doesn't count when it's hidden behind locked doors." He tried to reach for me, but the movement was too weak. His hand fell back to the sheets. "Forgive me," he whispered. "I thought I was saving you." I turned away before the tears could fall. "Maybe you were saving yourself." Outside, I stood by the window, watching the flag, the lawn, the air, autumn, and regret. Hayes quietly. "He doesn't have long," he said. "Maybe a few days. He wanted to see you one more time before—" "I'm not ready for that," I said. "I don't even know what to call him." "Maybe just Sir," he suggested. He handed me a small envelope, cream-colored and sealed with wax. My name was written on it in a steady military hand. "He wrote this years ago," Hayes explained. "Said it was for when you came home." I stared at the envelope, but didn't open it. Not yet. I wasn't sure I could handle more truth in one day. Before leaving, I wandered into the study. The room was lined with books, maps, and military commendations. On the desk, saw a photo. My mother, smiling, young, alive. Her eyes were the same shade as mine. There was also a second photo, me in Afghanistan, shaking hands with a colonel. It had been printed from a news article. Someone had framed it carefully, as if it were the only thing keeping the house alive. That was when it hit me. This man had built his life around ghosts, and now he wanted me to resurrect one of them. I left the study quietly, closing the door behind me. As I reached the front steps, the wind carried the sound of distant thunder. A storm was building. I turned to Hayes. "If I don't come back," I said, "make sure he knows I got his letter." He looked at me with something like sadness. He already knows Major. The driver opened the car door, but I hesitated. I looked back at the mansion one last time, its windows glowing dimly. Like for the first time, I felt the faint sting of sympathy. Maybe because I saw something of myself in him. The discipline, the solitude, the quiet ache of things unsaid. But then I remembered the years, birthdays missed, questions unanswered, nights wondering who I was. And the sympathy, hard. I got in the car without another word. Storm broke as we drove away, streaking the windshield like tears. Neither of us would shed. Somewhere behind those walls, a dying man whispered my name again. But I didn't look back, not yet. The envelope sat on the nightstand beside my hotel bed, untouched for 2 hours. I stared at it as if the paper itself might start talking. Every instinct built in the core told me to ignore it, stay mission-focused, control the situation. But this wasn't a battlefield I could control. Finally, near midnight, I gave in. I slit the wax seal with my pocket knife, the same one I carried through 3 deployments. Inside were 4 items: a folded letter, a birth certificate, a faded photograph, and a military assurance stamped with a Department of Defense seal. The birth certificate read, Grace Morgan Medical Center Ports, Virginia parents Robert Morgan and Laura Y. Morgan. For a few seconds, I just stared at my name, unable to breathe. It wasn't Carter, the name the orphanage had given me. It was the name I'd spent my life saluting without knowing why. The photograph was next, a Robert Morgan holding a baby wrapped in a white blanket. Beside him, woman with her, my mother. She was smiling at me, not the camera. The application at the bottom bore Morgan's signature. It was a recommendation for promotion dated the same day I enlisted. He'd signed it when I was 18 years old. The letter was written in a strong, deliberate hand. Elena, if you're reading this, I've run out of time to tell you in person. The world I served in was not kind after your mother's death threats were made real ones. I believed that the only way to keep you alive was to hide you, even from myself. I watched your career from afar. Every commendation, every mission report. I knew you carried the name I couldn't give you, but you earned the honor I could never take away. Forgive me if you can, Robert Morgan. I wanted to tear the letter in half, but instead I folded it back carefully. That contradiction, rage and reverence, was something the Corps never trained me for. The next morning, I met Hayes in the hotel cafe. He was already there, sipping black coffee like a man who'd aged 10 years overnight. He gestured to the chair opposite him. You read it? I did, and I stared at my cup. He's either the world's most devoted liar or the loneliest man I've ever heard of. Hayes sighed, I understand the anger, but you should know what he told you about the threats. It's not fiction. He slid a thin folder across the table. Inside were declassified reports stamped. The here read, Operation Amber tore us Marine Corps Joint Task Group Atlantic Command. Flipped through pages of dense text and redacted lines until one paragraph stopped me cold. Subject General Morgan and family received credible threats from surviving insurgent group following 1991 rescue op. Targeted attacks on dependents reported. Protective relocation recommended. Classified termination event staged to protect minor child. I looked up sharply. You're saying my death was planned? He nodded. The child listed was Elena Grace Morgan. The death certificate was falsified. Only 3 people knew your father, his aide, and the base commander, and my mother. She knew, she agreed, until she didn't. She died 2 months later in a car accident. After that, the general never spoke of it again. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. All those years thinking my parents had died, and the truth was they buried me instead, Hayes continued quietly. He tried to adopt you back. 11, the threat was over. The agency refused. Too many legal risks by then. Your records were sealed. The only way he could stay close was from a distance. I pushed the folder back toward him. You make it sound noble. He didn't flinch. It wasn't. It was desperate, but it came from love, major love. That word didn't sit right. Love doesn't abandon you in a dormitory with secondhand clothes and a state number pinned to your file. Love doesn't make you salute your own blood without knowing it. Back in my room, I sat on the floor, surrounded by the papers. The carpet smelled of cheap detergent, and the air conditioner rattled like old memories. I spread the documents out like a puzzle, trying to find sense in them. Birth certificate, military commendation, photo, letter. Yes, but not peace. I needed to hear him say it face to face. No more envelopes, no more intermediaries. I called Hayes again. Tell the general I'm coming back. He paused. He's weaker now, Major. You might not get the confrontation you're expecting. Then I'll settle for answers. The drive back to the mansion, the past, leaving the road slick and shining under gray daylight. When the gates came into view, it felt the same tightening in my chest as before, but this time it wasn't fear, it was resolve. Inside, the nurse met me at the door, surprised but not shocked. He's been waiting, she said. He doesn't have much strength. I walked straight upstairs without knocking. He was awake, propped up by pillows, his breathing labor. He looked smaller than before, as if the guilt itself had been holding him upright, and now it was slipping away. You left me with nothing, I said, standing at the foot of his bed. He looked at me, not startled, not defensive, just tired. I left you with your life, he said. It was all I had to give. That's not an excuse. No, it's not. I pulled the birth certificate from my pocket and tossed it onto the blanket. Was any of it worth it? He studied the document, then met my eyes every day since I've asked myself that same question. I wanted to scream, to shake the truth out of him. Instead, I whispered, You watched me join the Corps, didn't you? Yes, and you did nothing. I tried to help. Quietly. You never needed my hand. You were stronger than I was. Stronger because I had to be. His eyes filled, but he didn't cry. You have her. I hesitated. What was she like? Kind? He said, too kind for the world I lived in. She believed people could be saved. I only knew how to defend them. Something softened in me, just a fraction. For the first time, I noticed the framed photo of her on his nightstand, next to a medal and my childhood locket. He reached for the locket, fingers tremble. Mother made me promise to give this back when it was safe. He handed it to me. Inside was a tiny folded note, yellow with age. For IGM, always safe. The same words written on the photo I'd kept all these years. The handwriting matched his. That night, I sat in the study downstairs, tapped the windows steady as a metronome. On his desk, I found rows of binders labeled by year, Carter, E.G. My service records, deployment photos, newspaper clippings, commendations, all meticulously kept, every step of my career cataloged by a man I thought was dead. I turned one page and saw a photo of me shaking hands with a general after a mission. In the background, barely visible, was an older man in civilian clothes, watching, smiling. He'd been there all along. I leaned back exhausted for the first time. I didn't know what to feel. Hate required distance. Love required understanding. I was trapped somewhere between. As I closed the binder, I whispered, You hid me to protect me, but maybe you just didn't trust me to survive. Upstairs, I could hear the faint beeping of his monitors, steady and fragile. I didn't know if I wanted them to stop or never stop again. House was quiet before when I returned 2 days later. It wasn't just silence. It was the kind that presses against your chest like the air itself remembers something you shouldn't forget. The nurse greeted me with a nod. "He's resting, but you can see him soon," she said. "Not yet," I replied. "There's something I need to do first." She hesitated, but didn't stop me. Maybe she sensed that whatever I was looking for, it wasn't medicine. Found the study, the same one I closed on my last visit. The doorknob was cold metal against my palm. It turned easily. The smell hit paper and dust. Stacks of binders lined the walls, each labeled by year. I ran my hand across the spin. 2004. All of them marked with the same neat handwriting. At the far end of the room, under a framed photo of the Arlington Memorial Bridge, sat a mahogany desk. On it, folders stamped "Classified materials, do not remove." I hesitated, then opened it. Inside were copies of my own Marine Service records, deployment reports, commendations, field evaluations, all with my name. Everyone annotated in pencil, the notes precise and personal. Excellent leadership under pressure refuses to accept failure reminds me of Laura when she argued orders at Quantico. Still wears the locket. She doesn't know yet. I sank into the chair. My father hadn't just followed my career. He'd studied it like a map, leading home. A drawer on the right was locked. I found the key under a photo frame, almost too obvious. Inside the drawer, letters, dozens of them. All addressed to me all under. The earliest was from 1995. The last one dated just 2 months ago. I opened one at random. "You received your first commendation today. I saw the photo online. You look stronger than I ever was. I wish your mother could see you. I hope someday you'll understand why I had to disappear from your life. I never stopped being proud." Another letter read, "I started a fund in your name, scholarships for orphans joining the Corps. Maybe one of them will grow up with the courage to forgive their father." By the 5th letter, my eyes were burning. He had written to me for 30 years and never mailed a single word. There was a small box tucked behind the stack of letters. I opened it to find a medal, a silver star engraved with his name, underneath a note for her. "When she's ready." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He'd spent his life trying to give me protection, pride, and penance, all the things I never asked for. Footsteps in the hall broke my trance. Hayes appeared at the doorway, face drawn. "He's asking for you," he said quietly. It might be time I followed him up the stairs. The sound of medical monitors echoed faintly down the corridor. When I entered the Morgan, awake was awake. The step, his voice came. "You found the study," I nodded. "You kept everything he gave." A faint smile. "That's all I had left of you." I sat beside him, the weight of the letters still heavy in my pocket. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. He looked toward the window. "Because every time I tried, the past stopped me. The mission, the duty, the fear that someone would find you before I could." I studied his face, the same hard lines I'd inherited, but never recognized. "You could have trusted me," I said. "I'm not that child you left behind." His eyes softened. "No, you're the Marine I raised without being there." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The machine beeped steadily, the rhythm of borrowed time. Then he whispered, "Your mother wanted peace. I gave her protection instead. She was right. I was wrong. She loved you." I asked. He nodded. "Enough to forgive me. I hope you can too." He reached for something on the nightstand, my childhood locket. His hand shook as he placed it in mine. She said, "This would lead you home someday." I stared at the tiny eagle charm, now done with years. "I don't even know what home means," I whispered. "Neither did I," he said. "Not until now." His breathing grew shallower. Past and present tell. "Do you still feel pride?" "Yes, sir," I said softly. "Always." He smiled. "Then I did one thing right?" The monitor beeped irregularly. He whispered something else, but the sound was too weak to catch. I leaned closer. I watched every ceremony, every salute. I was there, even when you didn't see me. I felt my throat tighten. Why didn't you ever let me see you? He smiled again, barely. Because the moment you did, you wouldn't have needed me anymore. The monitor lay out a long, flat tone. The nurse moved quickly, checking for a pulse, but I already knew. General Robert Morgan, father, soldier, ghost, was gone. Hayes placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry, Major." I nodded slowly, eyes still fixed on the stillness before me. "I spent my life chasing rank, chasing missions," I said quietly. "But I never realized my greatest battle was learning the truth." Hayes handed me the folded flag from the foot of the bed. He asked that you have this, he said you earned it. I took the flag, pressing the fabric against my chest. It was heavier than I expected, like it carried not just his service, but everything he couldn't say. Outside, the storm had passed. The air smelled of wet grass and earth. The mansion looked smaller now, like it had exhaled after decades of holding its breath. For the first time in years, I saluted, not to a commander, not to a flag, but to the man who at 11 believed hiding his daughter was the only way to love her. "Sir." And for the first time, the words didn't feel like an order. They felt like forgiveness. The funeral took place 3 days later at Arlington National Cemetery. The November air carried that stillness only found among endless white headstones, where even the wind seems to lower its voice out of respect. Marines in dress blues stood at attention. Flags rippled softly above them. The band played Eterna Strong to Save the Navy hymn, slow. I stood in the back, away from the family section, my cover tucked under my arm. No one there knew who I was. To them, I was just another officer paying her respect. And maybe that was true. General Robert Morgan had earned every honor lie before him. His service record stretched across 4 decades. Beirut, Desert Storm, classified operations. No one would ever know his name. His hand had weight a legend whisper through barracks and Pentagon hallways alike. But the man banned the medals had carried a secret too heavy for any uniform. I watched as the honor guard folded the flag from his casket, perfect precision, triangle until only the remain visible. Each fold struck like a heartbeat. General Morgan served his country with courage, his family with sacrifice, and his God with humility. May his soul find peace, and may his service remind us that freedom is never free. Freedom, that word, echoed differently in my mind. He'd given his country everything, even his daughter. The ceremony ended. The Marines presented the folded flag to a woman sitting in the front row, the general's niece, I learned later. She accepted it tearfully, unaware that somewhere behind her stood the real next of kin. Hayes spotted me from across the crowd and made his way over, moving carefully between uniforms. "Major Carter," he greeted softly. "I wasn't sure if you'd come." "I almost didn't," I said. He nodded. "He'd be glad you did." He handed me a small velvet box. "He left this for you." I opened it quietly. Inside was a single silver bar, the insignia for a first lieutenant engraved on the back, for the daughter who outranked her father's fears. My throat tightened. "He had this made years ago," Hayes said. "He wanted you to know he always saw you as an officer in every sense, long before your commission." I looked down at the casket as it lowered into the ground, the dirt soft and dark. Part of me wanted to salute, but my hand wouldn't move. Instead, I whispered, "You could have just told me." After most of the crowd had gone, Hayes and I walked the path between headstones. "You said he had letters," I reminded him. "Yes." He replied, "He also recorded something. He made me promise not to show it to anyone but you." He handed me a small USB drive, plain unlabeled. I took it without a word. Something told me it wasn't closure I'd find inside that file. It was something heavier. Before I left, I stopped at the grave. 11 more. A new headstone had already been placed. General Robert A. Morgan, United States Marine Corps. Beloved husband, father, and soldier. They'd carved father in stone. I wondered if that word would ever feel real to me. I placed the silver bar on the grass and saluted. Then I turned and walked away. That night, I sat alone in my hotel room. The folded flag draped across the bed. The USB drive glinted in the lamplight. I hesitated, then plugged it into my laptop. The video opened with static before clearing into a grainy image. My father, sitting at his desk in that same steady uniform jacket on, eyes sharp but tired. He looked directly into the camera. Elena, if you're watching this, I'm gone. Hey, froze. I never found the courage to say these words while I was alive. I told myself it was duty, security protocol. Really, it was fear. I fear you hate me. I fear you see me not as a father, as the man who took your life away. Watch you grow into the Marine I always hoped to be. Every medal, every headline, every photo. I was there, in the shadows, but that's not what I want you to remember me for. I want you to remember that you were loved, fiercely, silently, endless. He drew a slow breath. If you ever doubt why I made those choices, look not at what I took, but at what you became. You're stronger than the secrets that shaped you, and if I taught you nothing else, I hope I taught you this. Honor is not about being perfect, it's about carrying the truth even when it hurts. He looked down, then back up, eyes glistening. Se fide, daughter, always. For the screen went dark. I sat there for a long time, the quiet filling the room like water. Deep inside, the anger began to loosen. The next morning, I drove out to the Chesapeake Bay. The air was crisp, the water a mirror of gray-blue light. I stood at the pier, the folded flag still in my arms. I unfolded a corner, letting the wind catch it. The stars fluttered, not as a symbol of mourning anymore, but of continuation. Years I'd lived by the Marine Code, never leave a man behind. I realize now that I'd left part of myself behind long ago, the part that still needed a father's approval to stand tall. I let the wind take the loose edge of the flag for a second, then folded it back carefully, pressing it to my chest. This time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like inheritance. That evening, I visited the base chapel. No ceremony, no ranks, just the echo of boots on marble. In the back row, whisper into the quiet. You write about one. The he can carry. I smiled for the first time in weeks, a small, tired. When grief finally starts turning into gratitude. As I left, I passed by a bulletin board covered in photos of fallen Marine. Someone had pinned a new one. My father's underneath and black was written. My legacy lives on. I stopped for a moment, hand resting on the frame. For the first time, I whispered the words back. Sade. And in that whisper, something inside me finally let go. 2 weeks after the funeral, the days felt unnervingly quiet. No orders, no reports, no salutes, just silence. The kind that follows when the uniform is folded neatly on a chair and you're left staring at yourself without rank or mission. I tried going back to the base, but the rhythm felt off. The sound of cadence drills made me restless. The world had kept moving, but part of me was still standing under that gray Arlington sky. One morning, a package arrived at my quarters in Camp Pendleton. No return address, just my name written in that same neat, slanted handwriting I'd come to recognize. Morgan, inside, was a bundle of letters, yellowed with age, tied with a strip of faded blue ribbon, and a note from Hayes.
These were found in the study after the estate was cleared. The general wanted you to have them when you were ready. I wasn't sure I ever would be ready, but I untied the ribbon anyway. The first letter was dated the year I turned 10. I saw your school picture in the local paper today. You'd lost a front tooth. I laughed harder than I have in years. I wish I could have been there to tell you that gap-toothed smile looked like courage itself. The next one from when I was 18. You enlisted today. I watched from a distance. You saluted the flag before you walked inside. That was the day I knew you'd find me one way or another. Prayed that when you did, you'd forgive me then. Another, your first deployment report came through last week. I shouldn't have access to it, but I do. Your team called you Steel. You always were tougher than the name I gave you. Each page was its own confession, pieces of a life spent in hiding, but not absent. I'd spent years for me, but he had never stopped being there, just beyond the light. By the 7th letter, my eyes blurred. I stopped trying to hold back. The one letter near the bottom was different. Newer paper, smoother ink. Elena, this one isn't about me, it's about you. There's a fund being set up, the Morgan Scholarship for military orphans. You'll find the paperwork enclosed. I used my pension to start it. It's yours now. I want you to use it to help others who grew up the way you did. Maybe that's how you'll understand what I couldn't say out loud. That the pain we survive can still serve someone else. I unfolded the documents, enclosed. It was all there. The legal forms, the foundation charter, his signature. He'd turned guilt into something that might actually heal others. For the first time, I didn't just see him as the man who'd left me behind. I saw him as a Marine who never stopped trying to make amends, the only way he knew how, through service. That night, I took a drive back to Norfolk. The orphanage was still there, though it had been turned into a community youth center. The sign out front read Morgan Family Center, established 2016. Inside, the walls were in photos of children, smiling, laughing, running. There was a plaque near the entrance. Dedicated to those who were never forgotten, even when they didn't know they were remembered. A woman behind the reception desk greeted me kindly. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I nodded toward the plaque. "I just came to see the name." She smiled. "The general's daughter, right? He used to stop by sometimes, never stayed long, but always donated anonymously. Said he wanted to keep the lights on." I swallowed hard. He did more than that. Walk down the hall, memories flooding back, the peeling paint that used to cover these same walls, the smell of chalk and instant oatmeal. I peeked into the playroom. A little girl in pigtails was coloring an American flag. She looked up. "In green. Hi, are you?" she asked. I am." "Wow," she said. "My dad's one too. He's far away right now." I knelt beside her. "Already brave. You know." That she nodded solemnly as if I told her something sacred. When I stood to leave, the director met me near the door. "We've been meaning to ask if you'd come back someday," she said, "to talk to the kids. They need people like you." I hesitated, glancing back at the laughter echoing down the hall. "I think I just might," I said. Back at my hotel that evening, I reread the last letter. It was dated the week before he died. "Elena, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I do ask for understanding. I know I can't give back the years I stole, but maybe I can give you something that lasts longer than regret. When you stand before those children, remember this. They'll look at you the way I loved at your mother, as proof that light can last. Don't let my mistakes define you. Let them remind you what kind of leader never hides from love or truth. Meant to lead not just Marines, but hearts. See my daughter." I held that letter to my chest, tears finally falling freely. I'd spent my life training not to cry, to push through pain, to keep my uniform clean.
But that night, I let it happen, not out of weakness, but release. A few days later, I met with Hayes again to sign the paperwork for the foundation. Sat across from each other in his office, the morning sun filtering through half-closed blinds, he slid the final document toward me. He wanted you to be the chair of the board. I stared at the signature line. Elena G. Morgan. Not Carter, not anymore. I'll do it, I said. He smiled. He'd be proud, I think. He already was, I replied. That afternoon, I returned to the base chapel where I'd last whispered my goodbye. This time, I wasn't alone. Framed photo. My father in uniform standing beside my mother. I placed it on the shelf beneath the cross, next to the names of the fallen. Then I took off my gloves, touched the cold marble, and whispered, I forgive you, Dad. Not because you earned it, but because I finally understand. The chapel was quiet, except for the flutter of the flag outside, and in that silence I could almost hear his voice again. See, daughter. I smiled. Seh. That night, before turning out the light, I placed the last of his letters in a box labeled Legacy. I didn't know where life would take me next, perhaps command, perhaps teaching, perhaps just peace. But for the first time in decades, I felt like I belonged to something bigger than the Corps, to a story that had finally come full circle. A year passed before I realized the house no longer haunted me. It had simply become part of my story, not the wound, but the scar that proved I healed. I'd stayed in the Corps, but my duties had shifted. Instead of combat operations, I was now assigned to the Community and Veteran Outreach Program, traveling to schools, community centers, and bases across the country. The new role wasn't about strategy or tactics. It was about people. It was about teaching the next generation of Marines what service really meant, beyond medals and... Still some mornings I'd wake to the echo of that phone call. Your father, General Morgan, is dying. He wants to see you. And I'd remember the young woman who had boarded that plane to Virginia with more questions than answers. The one who thought revenge would bring her peace. But revenge had turned into revelation, and revelation into redemption. It was a Saturday in late spring when I returned to Norfolk for a dedication ceremony at the Morgan Family Center. The scholarship program, the one he'd created, had grown faster than anyone expected. 12 young men and women stood in dress blues that day, all former orphans who earned their place at the Naval Academy or the Marines. The center director handed me a microphone. Major Elena Morgan, she said proudly, the woman whose courage inspired this legacy, stepped forward for a moment. I froze. Public speaking had never scared me, but this was different. This wasn't a briefing or a debriefing. It was personal. I looked out at the faces of the recruit, nervous, proud, and I thought of the little girl I'd 11 been sitting alone on a bunk bed, wondering why the world forgotten her. My father, I began, was a Marine who made mistakes. Some you'll read about in history books, most you'll never hear. But the biggest one wasn't about strategy or command. It was about silence. I paused. The air was still, the kind of quiet that listens. He believed that protecting someone meant keeping them in the dark. He thought distance was safety. But what I learned, what he finally taught me, is that love doesn't hide behind secrecy. Real courage means telling the truth, even when it hurts. A few of the recruits slowly. You learn as Marine that orders loyal matter, but don't forget that integrity is what makes you worthy of them. I looked down at my father's silver star pinned to my pocket. He 11 wrote that honor isn't about being perfect, it's about carrying the truth. I used to think he was wrong about everything, but on that point... He was right. After the ceremony, one of the young Marines approached me. She was barely 19, across her nose, posture straight as a rye. Said he about General Morgan and about you. Can I ask something? Of course. She hesitated. Did you ever forgive him? Really forgive him?
I looked past her to the courtyard where the flag waved gently in the wind. Forgiveness wasn't a medal you could pin to your chest. It was a quiet decision you made every day, even when it still hurt. "Yes," I said softly. "I did, because forgiveness wasn't for him, it was for me." She nodded thoughtfully. "I think I understand." Maybe she did, or maybe she would someday. That evening, I drove to Arlington. The cemetery was quiet, bathed in the golden light of sunset. I found his grave easily. I always did. The headstone was simple, the grass neat. Someone had left a small marine coin on top of the stone. I knelt and placed my cover beside me. "Hey, Dad," I whisper. "Your scholarship's working. You'd be proud." The wind shifted, and a few petals from a nearby cherry blossom tree floated down, resting gently on the stone. "I used to hate you," I admitted quietly. "I thought you were a coward, but now I think you were just human. You made an impossible choice, and maybe I finally understand what that means." Reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the 2 dog tags, his and mine. They lang softly together, metal against metal, echoing like a heartbeat. "I kept my promise," I said. "I carried the name, I carried the truth." The sun dipped lower, washing the sky in amber. I stood, brushed the dust from my knees, and saluted. It wasn't a formal salute, no stiffness, no ceremony. It was a daughter's salute. Then I turned and began the long walk back to the car. The rows of headstones caught the last light of day, glowing like quiet sentinel. Halfway down the path, a young boy in civilian clothes stopped. He pointed toward the grave I just left. "Was that your dad?" I smiled. Yes, it was. He grinned shy. He must have been a good one. I looked back at the grave, then at the boy. "Yeah," I said, "he was. Eventually." Later that night, back in my hotel room, I wrote a letter, not for him this time, but for myself. "Dear Dad, I used to think revenge would make me feel strong, but all it ever did was keep me chained to the past. Now I see that real strength isn't in punishment, it's in peace. You taught me that the hard way, but you taught me all the same. Wherever you are, I hope you found Mom. Tell her I finally came home." Morgan. I folded the letter and slipped it into my locket, the same locket he'd 11 placed in my hand. A week later, I posted a short message on the Marine Corps official social page, something small, meant for those who followed the stories of service and sacrifice. Some wounds don't heal with time. They heal with understanding. I learned that forgiveness is the final act of courage. If you've lost someone you never truly knew, don't let the silence win. Reach out, speak, remember. The post went viral among veterans and families. Dozens of messages poured in from Marine soldiers, even civilians, each sharing their own stories of distance, reconciliation, and love. Rediscovered too late, hey read every single one. At the very end of the day, as I closed my laptop, I whispered the words that had started it all, the ones I'd 11 spoken in disbelief and now somehow in peace. The lawyer called me at work. A faint smile touched my lips. The call that had 11 shattered my world had also rebuilt it. I stood, looked out at the night sky beyond the window, and whispered softly, "Free, Dad. We're both finally home." If you've ever carried a story like this one about family forgiveness or finding your way back home, I invite you to share it. Maybe your words will help someone else find their peace too. And if this story touched your heart, remember to stay with us for more true lessons of love, honor, and second chances.